forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings and welcome to the latest episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace alongside my co-host, but absolutely never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. And Aaron, we are 1/4 of the way through the college football season, if you can believe it already. I know.
Can't. It always happens. It always goes down this way.
It goes by too dang fast, man, every year.
Yep.
Every year.
It's true. That's okay. I mean, I've enjoyed it so far. So, the worst thing is like not being able to enjoy it while it's going on for whatever reason. I've enjoyed, even last week, everybody said, oh, that's a terrible slate. No, there were some fun matchups.
Sure.
Ended up being fun, so.
Well, let's get to it. Let's get to our Big Five on Bigger Ten as we now head into week 4 of the college football season. And let's begin with turnovers. And here's why I wanted to start with this, and we don't have to belabor the point and talk about it too much, but with all the discussion of analytics and advanced analytics and EVA and win expectancy and success rate and all these terms that we talk about now, which I think all have their place, this past week in the Big Ten demonstrated still, you can't run away from the old magic, brother. The one stat that still rules them all, even with all of these analytics that we now all worship in this era of the algorithm, is turnovers. So many games in the Big Ten this week determined by turnovers. You looked at Maryland versus Virginia. Maryland scored 35 unanswered points, won 42-14.
Yeah.
If you just looked at the score, you thought they just ran away with it, right? Nope. Pretty almost dead even in the stat sheet. Maryland +4 in turnovers.
Same with Wisconsin.
You're thinking, you know what? They covered the spread, and a lot of people looked at that as maybe, Buffalo could or not Buffalo, but
Georgia Southern.
Excuse me, the fighting Clay Heltons. They played Buffalo week 1. That Georgia Southern could give them a game, right? And if you just watched, like the ticker at the bottom of the TV, you'd think, well, Wisconsin pretty much handled them. Nope. It was pretty competitive all the way through. Wisconsin was +6 in turnovers. If you just looked at the score, maybe you were watching Florida-Tennessee Saturday night and you didn't watch much of Syracuse and Purdue. Well, that game, statistically, dead even. It's just Purdue -3 in turnovers, and so Syracuse wins by double digits. This was a familiar refrain throughout many games in the Big Ten, which still goes to show that advanced analytics and all that stuff we talk about, particularly when it comes to handicapping, it has its place, it has value. But unless you are an absolute top-tier team, if you're Michigan, and at one point in the game against Bowling Green, you're -4 in turnovers and you're still winning by 3 touchdowns, all right? Unless you are dramatically more talented than your opponent, and most weeks, most teams aren't. The stat that still matters more than anything else is, did you commit turnovers and set up your opponent for success?
Yeah, that's just keeping it simple, stupid. And, you talk about advanced analytics. When you put it and you juxtapose it with what you just laid out, the advanced analytics are really no more than just statistical noise at that point. Just kind of, they're there. Like you said, they have their place. But, man, I was watching that Wisconsin game thinking, my intuition might be correct in that, there's another turnover, there's another interception. Hey, I needed it to go over for our confidence points, our confidence picks, and it wasn't like Wisconsin played a clean game either. But the difference in that game was, I think, 5 or 6 turnovers. It was 6 turnovers against Wisconsin for Georgia Southern. Mm-hmm. You just can't win basically any game, no matter who you're playing. Even if you're overmatched, you cannot win, or undermatched, you can't really win any game, being -5, -6 in turnovers. And that was the one that I was watching the closest. Of course, I did watch Maryland and Virginia as well, and I thought, man, I think I had them on a parlay or something like that. And I'm like, there's no way that they're going to cover the spread. Well, turnovers help cover spreads. We learned this weekend. So, yeah, it was ugly. It was still a fun weekend overall across the college football landscape. I don't know if you stayed up to watch Colorado versus Colorado State.
I watched most of it, yeah.
It was still a fun weekend, but, yeah, a lot of ugly play.
I mean, no program proves .1 more than yours. I mean, it's been a dumpster fire offensively the last 2 years, and the Hawkeyes have still won 18 games. Why? Because they win the turnover margin almost every single week. So there you go. All right, next topic, number 2 on our list. Let's talk. I mentioned Michigan being up on Bowling Green despite being -4 in turnovers, but let's talk about the 2-time reigning Big Ten champions. I had a lot to say about this on Michigan podcast here on the channel earlier this week. I just am really underwhelmed by what I saw in the non-conference. There at least was a narrative that J.J. McCarthy had kind of taken that next step to be the kind of quarterback that can drive a program now, as opposed to he was basically a Jag plus last year in his first year as a starter. You know, Cade McNamara was a Jag. J.J. was a Jag plus. He could make a few more throws than Cade, but wasn't being asked to do much more than Cade, given how great the team was. But maybe this year he was ready to play like his preseason projections as a first-round quarterback. But given how pathetic the competition was, and this year's non-conference schedule wasn't as bad as last year's, but it still wasn't good. I don't know. It just reeks to me of a team that, and some of it I think is all the coaching shuffles with the 3-game Harbaugh suspension, and guys are doing double duty. Sharon Moore had to do triple duty the other night. He's offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, and he's head coach. But it really looked to me so far, it looks to me like a team that read a lot of its preseason magazines. That is like, you know, we live in an era in America where self-awareness, we always say, is dead. Maybe this team is too self-aware. Maybe it's too aware of how great it is supposed to be. And it kind of has just decided, yeah, we'll get into this later in the year against teams that kind of count. And when we think that, we have to break a sweat. And I don't know that you can turn it on and turn it off like that. I also don't know that I'm overreacting. So give me a more impartial observer view than the emotion that I bring to the table as a Michigan fan.
You're overreacting. I told you this earlier this week. I had to both for I was tempted to do it on Saturday night, and then I actually did it on Sunday with your Lions takes. I had to mute Michigan Podcast's Twitter account. I really did. I was just
my own employees have to mute me.
It was insufferable.
In a way, I almost take that. I know I should be ashamed, but frankly, I feel like complimented, but yes.
Do you have the horses or do you not? Now, there is probably an element of truth, but after a game like that against Bowling Green, if that's not going to get their attention, I don't know what is.
True.
So I would say RELAX.
Nice.
Relax. You're fine. You're still the preseason favorites. Once we enter conference play, you know, I think your players will start taking this a little bit more seriously. You'll have Jimmy back in the building. You guys are going to be fine. Yeah, I think Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy kind of had the same game. They just went in there against MAC opponents, inferior competition, and just thought, hey, we're going to light up the scoreboard by showing up. And you can't do that. You just can't do that. So I think you're going to be fine. I think you're overreacting. And if I'm wrong, then, I mean, shame on me.
If you're wrong, you're going to have to keep me muted on Twitter.
Probably.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
All right, topic number 3 this week on the Bigger Five. Let's talk about Michigan's opening opponent in the Big Ten opener this week, Rutgers. It's the 3rd straight year now under Greg Schiano that the Scarlet Knights have started 3-0. They did it in 2021, they did it in 2022, and now they've done it this year as well. In 2020, of course, they got the academic exemption to go play in a New Year's Day bowl game. First time the program's ever played in one of those. Now they got blown up by Sam Hartman and Wake Forest, but they still got there. So the question is, though, is this 3-0 start different? The previous ones did not net a postseason berth. Do you think this one could? Does Rutgers seem improved to you? That was another game last week on the scoreboard. It looked like they totally dominated Virginia Tech. But again, if you look at the stat sheet, yards per play and everything else, all pretty even. Rutgers was just +3 in turnovers. So what say you?
Yeah, we're going to have to... We'll find out this week if they show a pulse against Michigan. I mean, because they're going to have to pull out all the stops to beat Michigan on the road. Or even make it even close to competitive. So we'll have a better answer to that question. But, the story of the game, the box score tells a different story than the final score. I don't know. It's still, the final score still matters. They're still turning their opponents over. They're still winning in dominating fashion, regardless of how that was accomplished, all 3 weeks. I think this was the first week they gave up double-digit points. So I'm inclined to say it's got to be a little bit different. But again, we won't really have a good answer to that question until this week, whether or not they look completely overmatched, completely inept against a much better opponent than they've been playing so far. But I'm inclined to say, yeah, it's a little bit different. It's hard to judge these up-and-coming teams in the Big Ten East just because of the competition that's around them. And
it's also, under Schiano, Rutgers should have beaten Michigan in 2020, and that probably would have gotten Harbaugh fired, frankly, if they had. In 2021, Michigan won the Big Ten championship. Toughest Big Ten game it had was Rutgers. Then went down to the very last possession. They had to get a fumble to close that game out. 2022, Rutgers, Michigan won the Big Ten again. Rutgers had the lead at the half. So they won't be intimidated at all. They won't. I think the issue they have, though, is they want to play a very similar style to Michigan. It's just Michigan's going to do it with a lot higher grade of recruit. But I'll tell you this, if Michigan plays like it did against Bowling Green, absolutely Rutgers could win. All right, let's get to your team, Iowa. So there's been a lot said during the offseason.
Really?
About this 25 points per game that Iowa's got to average to save Brian Ferentz's job, okay, the offensive coordinator and the head coach's son. And Iowa did not hit that mark the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, it went way over that mark in week 3. But, I'm not an Iowa fan like you, but I have, in another life, I professionally covered this team every day. I mean, I've probably watched as much Iowa football as a non-Iowa football fan has.
I'm sorry.
In the last 20 plus years. I cannot recall Iowa down on the goal line against a scrub opponent with like 5 seconds left, making sure to tack on another touchdown, like ever. I can't recall them ever doing such a thing. And yet they did that exact thing against Western Michigan on Saturday to get over 40 points, to cover the spread, because it was 28. And also to clearly get a boost from the lack of points that were expected to be scored against Utah State, because you got to score more against Utah State and Western Michigan to compensate for the lack of points you're going to get against better defenses like the one you're playing this week in Penn State. So there's been a lot of talk about this. And a lot of people wondered, hey, would they run up the score to help Brian Ferentz get to where he needs to go with those 25 points per game? I don't know if they ran up the score or not with that in mind, Aaron. I do know, though, I don't recall ever seeing an Iowa football program under Kirk Ferentz do something like that. But now you'll probably tell me of a couple of instances when they did, and I just don't remember, so the floor is yours.
I don't think they were trying to run up the score. I really don't. I think they had their 5th-string running back in there, their 2nd-string quarterback, and I'm sure 2nd and 3rd-string offensive linemen. I mean, how often is it that your 5th-string running back gets to score a touchdown in a game? Not very often, unless the year was like, what was it, 2011 with all of the, I can't remember what year it was when Iowa had, 6,000 injuries at the running back position. But I think they were just trying to get some play out of these guys. I mean, if they were just trying to end, if they were just trying to run up the score, I mean, they would have probably tried to call a few more pass plays in the second half there, but they kept the ball on the ground for most of that second half. And I'd say overall, too, on this team, I think it is better offensively than it is last year. I think pass protection still, again, that's 3 weeks in a row. It looked pretty good, although Bowling Green did have a couple of pressures of McNamara and a couple sacks, few sacks actually. But overall, it was still a lot better than last year. They are not at the level to compete in an environment and situation like this weekend. It's going to be a bloodbath over in Happy Valley. And so I don't know what's going on with Cade McNamara. I thought in the first game, he saw the field pretty well. He saw the field, despite his limitations mobility-wise because of his injury. Second game, I just thought, you know what, that's a pressure environment, a really good defense. And, he missed on some throws. Those are timing things that, can kind of get worked out as you get more reps. And then this week, he had a couple of touchdown passes, but that was probably, I would say, his least encouraging, we'll put it that way, performance. And I don't know if you saw Brian Ferentz just explode after McNamara's interception right before halftime. But if you read his lips, he said, "That's stupid and selfish BS." And so I don't know what's going. I think it's a combination of just trying to fit it in there and trying to stat pad. I think it's a combination of not seeing that he's holding on to the ball really, really long. So
they still had him in the game with 5 minutes left, up 31-10.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to
jacked up pretty hard too.
I think they were just trying to get him some reps.
Okay.
So I don't know. I kind of defended him last week or 2 weeks ago when you said you were disappointed in him. I'm starting to get to that place now because these are mental mistakes that you don't need your quarterback to be making. You certainly can't make those when you're playing the Penn States of the world. So they're better than they were last year offensively. That is a very low bar, but still not good enough to have any sort of chance to be competitive against the team that they're about to go up against.
Well, you mentioned Cade McNamara in his start. First half of the year against Utah State, first half of the first game, 62% completions, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The next 3 halves of football that he has played, the next 5 halves of football he has played, 54% completions, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions.
Petrusing before our eyes.
Yeah, that's not a good trend line. All right, let's move on. And each week we are putting up, or I am anyway, putting up power ratings of how I see the Big Ten after each week's game of action on our Twitter feed over at Bigger10. All right, so with the season about 1/4 of the way through, here's where I would power rank the teams right now. And this is, when I put together a top 25 this time of year, it would be 60% resume, 40% eye test. And then it gets less eye testy and more resume as you play more games as the season goes on. Just doing a power rating, a lot of this is frankly just eye test. There haven't been a lot of marquee games in our league yet. I got Penn State number 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3rd. And then after that, man, I don't know. I've got Iowa 4th, Wisconsin 5th. I've got Rutgers 6th, Maryland 7, Minnesota 8, Michigan State gave up an all-time worst 713 yards of offense to Washington last week, by the way. Illinois 10th, Nebraska 11th, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern bringing up the rear. Do you have any major disagreements there?
No major ones. Maybe minor ones. You could just say, Wisconsin's lost a game. Rutgers and Maryland have both played, at least in Rutgers' case, they've played a couple of Power 5 schools, including, it's Northwestern, I get that. And Virginia Tech. Maryland played Virginia. I know it's just Virginia. Minor squabbles, no major ones.
Okay. All right. Well, that was simple enough then. Let's get to Would You Rather. We'll do that when we come back. All right, this week's game of Would You Rather, Aaron, you will begin. Would you rather bet Purdue on the money line at home against Wisconsin or lay the 3.5 on the road with Ohio State at Notre Dame?
3.5 on the road. Ohio State at Notre Dame. Last week, we finally got an Ohio State game that looks like you would expect an Ohio State performance to look like in the non-conference slate. I'm not completely sure they've put everything together. I'm also not totally sold on Notre Dame, although they have looked good, especially defensively. But I would rather put 3.5 on the road with Ohio State rather than bet Purdue money line at home against Wisconsin.
Okay.
I really don't know what we have with Purdue and Wisconsin. I have a better idea, I think, of what we have with Ohio State and Notre Dame, so that's my reasoning. Would you rather be Pat Fitzgerald's lawyer right now or Mel Tucker's?
The answer to this question is going to get me in trouble. So let me try to answer it in a way that doesn't get us in trouble. I'd rather be Mel Tucker's attorney because I think in the current political climate, he has more cards to play than Pat Fitzgerald does.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Neither do I. Just a form of expression. For you, would you rather play Iowa to win on the money line in the whiteout at Penn State or lay the 26 points at home with Michigan against Rutgers?
26 points at home with Michigan against Rutgers.
Wow.
Iowa has no shot, I believe, in this game. I think at the very best, they can keep it competitive for a half. I think in the second half, though, you'll see Penn State just pull away. I think Michigan is demonstrably better, at least on paper, than Rutgers. Now, no, they didn't show that last week, and they haven't really showed that a lot in the preseason. Mm-hmm. But I think they'll turn it on. I think they can turn it on. I think they will turn it on, and I think it's a better bet to bet Michigan essentially winning by 4 touchdowns than it is to Iowa to overcome a whiteout at Penn State.
Interesting. You went opposite the way I would have gone on both of those. Interesting. Okay.
Finally, for you, would you rather take Iowa, Penn State over 40 points, which is the total right now, or Minnesota, Northwestern over 38.5?
Now, there's big-time weather expected in the Pennsylvania area this weekend.
I've been keeping an eye on the forecast. And
what are you hearing on that right now?
Just cloudy right now. Okay. That's the latest. That's the last time that
because
I checked it.
The Miami Temple line just had like a 3-point drop. A bunch of sharps jumping on the under in that game because heavy rains were given like an 80% forecast on Tuesday for the Philadelphia area.
Yeah.
So, but that Philly is, it's not like it's 5 minutes away from State College, and one game's at 11 or noon and the other one's at night. So a lot can happen, over 6 hours, but that would be a factor to me. But I don't want a part of the over in any Northwestern game. Even the game they won 28-7 over UTEP also went under. I think those Minnesota and Northwestern have the 2 worst quarterback situations in our league now.
Ethan Kaliak-Menis. I just like saying that name. The last drive for Minnesota at the end of the game, it was probably out of reach, but the last play of that last drive for Minnesota, it was clear he just wanted out.
Not out of reach if you were holding a Minnesota plus 15 ticket, if you know what I'm saying, brother. Not out of reach.
You too? At 2, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking game result, it was out of reach.
I had him on a monster parlay.
Yeah, but if you were holding a Minnesota plus 15 plus 7.5, if you're because it was 31-20, right? If you were holding a Minnesota plus 7.5, it was not out of reach.
Yeah.
Depends on what outcome we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, we'll come back and we'll wrap things up with our Twitter poll results as well as our feedback of the week next. So now that we've reached the quarter of the way through tent pole, we're asking you again. Who is the best team in the Big Ten 1/4 of the way through the season? 42% of you said Penn State, 30% said Michigan, 17% Ohio State, and 11.2% said other.
Who is the other?
And I was just going to say, what other do you think has shown itself to be better than those 3 teams?
Those are all Iowa fans.
They're just all Iowa fans? Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. I think the rankings are right where they should be.
I agree.
Other than
I think the vote totals are probably correct. Yeah. I think that's pretty solid.
That's pretty right on the money.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that brings us to Terps Guy as our feedback of the week. He thinks Maryland should be number 4. I mean, they struggled with Charlotte. Remember, they didn't take the lead in that game until like 6 minutes in the third quarter. They were dominant against Virginia, but they got a bunch of turnovers in that game. But okay, I mean, Maryland, Iowa on a neutral right now. What is that? Maybe a 2-point spread, maybe for Iowa, maybe 3. That's it. Mm-hmm. So, okay, Yeah,
and you can make the case for any of these. That's why you asked me, and I know you love this. Any major squabbles?
Yeah.
And I gave you minor squabbles.
Yeah.
I know you love that. Did it just for you.
I mean, at this juncture, if we're arguing that if a team is 6th and they should be 4th, it's minor. Now, if it's mid-November and we're talking about bowl slotting, then the difference between 4th and 6th really matters, right? Okay. But right now, and we haven't, we've only had like a couple of conference games so far. They're all kind of minor quibbles, unless you are really adamant that you think Ohio State or Michigan should be number 1 over Penn State, for example. But okay. Well, this week, we're
going to start getting some answers.
Yes. I mean, this coming week, we have 6 top 25 matchups. That's the most we've had in September in 17 years. And one of them is not Florida State Clemson, remember, because Clemson technically still isn't in the AP top 25. So throw that game in there as a 7th, and that may decide one of the divisions in the ACC when it's all said and done. We're going to get some clarity this week for sure, which will give us a lot more to talk about next week right here on Bigger 10. So don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow. Help us define, whether it's on iTunes or right here on YouTube, more Big Ten fans just like you. Follow us every day on Twitter in between episodes at Bigger 10 as well. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next week right here on Bigger 10.